Steagle. He's a Steagle man.
You know what my sign's gonna say when I bring it to Elimination Chamber? There's just something. There's something off about the way he sees the world, and it's pretty fascinating.
Sorry, I'm trying to make a point, but I'm losing it because I'm getting distracted by Rosie. Hey, Rosie. Hey, good girl.
In space, no one can hear you podcast. It's Xenomorph in time on My Favorite Alien.
What exactly are we dealing with here?
Old and busted, new hotness.
And what could that possibly be?
Alien.
They do exist.
The boys have been watching the X-Files too much.
It is possible.
Welcome to My Favorite Alien, the pop culture podcast that deep dives into a different alien every week, almost. This week, we're jumping headfirst into the frank discussion of the Xenomorph from the Alien franchise. Created in 1979 in Ridley Scott's seminal work, Alien, the Xenomorph has been haunting audience imaginations for 45 years with a blend of organic, inorganic, and psychosexual imagery. My guest this week is a lover of the franchise and appreciator of all things pop culture. Welcome to the show, Max Rothschild. I just gave your full name. Is that okay? Max, tell me, what is the Xenomorph, and when did you first encounter this beast?
I first discovered Ridley Scott's seminal 1979 classic when I was probably way too young. I think I was about 9 years old. I was, as you and I were both children of the 90s, and so I grew up, going to the video store and seeing all the cool video boxes that were from movies that were way too high above my pay grade age-wise and wanting to watch them all the same. And so I remember begging my parents to let me watch Alien from the time I was like 6 years old because I always just loved aliens and, all like the sort of like Martians, Mars attacks, Little Green Men, all that stuff from a very early age. And Alien said it right on the box. This is the movie about Alien. And so I wanted to watch it.
An iconic image too, like the VHS cover. This is the
big
egg,
time.
The green egg.
The big green egg and that tagline in space, no one can hear you scream. Like it.
Oh, that's what it was. I thought it was podcast. I'm such an idiot. Whoa.
I just figured you wanted to get some, clever SEO, some good metrics for your intro. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm trying my best. The Xenomorphs look come from H.R. Giger's surreal and unsettling biomechanical artwork, blending organic horror and mechanical precision. Like, is this movie as successful without his imagery?
Absolutely not. I mean, his imagery, I think, is one of the key springboards to make the movie into something that could have been just, some schlocky 70s sci-fi flick into something that we're still talking about in 2025.
I kind of disagree because I think the filmmaking, the rest of the actual filmmaking beyond like the production design is really tight. Like Alien is a good script. It's a good movie. It's a tight thriller or horror film. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I understand like the Alien design is like, is so instrumental, but I think like would be just discrediting the rest of the filmmaking by saying that it's just like, it wouldn't be the same without it. It wouldn't be the same without it. You're right. I don't know what we're talking about.
I mean, like, I think that both things are true. Like, so I sort of glossed over when I said that, I wanted to see it because I saw the video cassette at the video store. That's true. But the other piece to it is that when I was about six-ish, the third movie, Alien 3, came out. And as residents of Toronto from the early 90s, you probably spent as much time as I did at the Silver Snail, the iconic comic store down on Queen Street. And when Alien 3 rolled out, they put a full life-size statue of the alien in the window. And cool. I remember seeing that thing and then just being mesmerized. What is this terrifying thing in the window? And it's the alien from the movie. And that also made me want to see it. So I think that, in addition to it being an alien, it was also that design. And, we can delve into the script because there's some stuff we should talk about the script. But I do think that the design sort of elevated the whole thing to another level and got people talking about it, not just because it was this interesting story that was really well done in space, but also because they'd never seen anything like this thing on screen.
Truly alien in the design. I think like that
Absolutely.
If you're gonna name your film Alien, you better come prepared. You can become armed with a good alien, and I would argue it's probably the best.
Yeah, I would say it set the bar, and it is the definition of coming to the table with a creature design and a story, everything that actually lives up to, that iconic, simple title, Alien.
So the xenomorph is kind of never the same twice. Face hugger, chest burster, warrior, queen. Why are we fascinated with? I don't want to say we're not fascinated with it, but like the reproductive process of the species is like on full display, and like is like a core part of its like, not its like horror, but like I mean body horror is a big part of it. Like there's something, it's born out of violence. I think they say in the movie, and it's like it bursts out of the chest. It's so graphic. It's so horrifying, and that's its birthing process. That's the way it comes into the world. I don't know what is that connected to Giger's like psychosexual imagery, like the use of yonic and pelvic. Phallic is the opposite of yonic, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, especially if you look at some of the designs he had, they were sort of a little bit more that informed the movie, but ended up informing some of his later work more. I would say a lot of it's sapphic as well. And I definitely think that he was leaning into what he read on the page. Just sort of briefly talking about the script, my recollection, in fairness, it's been a while since I've watched the special features on the DVD, but my recollection is that when Dan O'Bannon and the other guy, I'm sorry, apologies to the guy who is not Dan O'Bannon, but I'm forgetting his name, but the two scriptwriters, when they wrote it, they had an alien, but it wasn't a clear design in the script. And what's also interesting about the script for a movie that is so, notably the movie that spawned the Bechdel test,
Right.
it is a script that doesn't gender a single character in the script.
Right.
And so I think that you have this script from these nameless truckers type characters that are going through the motions of this alien encounter and experience something that is so clearly, a rape metaphor in terms of how it's penetrative and violent and all of that. And we can delve more into the sort of sexual politics of it all, although I don't think we're going to be able to do it justice because it's such an interesting topic in itself. But I think that H.R. Giger reads that on the page and thinks, okay, I need to really lean into this. We're going to have something that is sexual, but we're also going to have something that is deeply non-organic, and that's where you sort of get more the industrialism to it, that sort of technological side to it. And I think Giger like picked up on all of that to create this thing that is so, for lack of a better word, alien, so foreign, so just unfamiliar and terrifying all at once.
Unsettling too. You look
Yes.
at you look at a lot of his paintings, his artwork, even his like album covers, and they're like, there's just something off about the way he sees the world, and it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, like, I think that some of what he did and some of what he drew from, the stuff that he didn't use for Alien ultimately ended up inspiring things like Species, which is another movie that like famously uses his designs. And in that one, it's much more of the clearly sapphic mixed with the technological. And I think that, he's picking up on all these things and making something like deeply, deeply unsettling and terrifying. He was such an interesting guy. Like, you look at some of the behind the scenes stuff about him being on set and he was creeping everybody out. Like, I remember where there was like some hilarious interview with him on the DVD where he's talking, like, he's like playing into the whole strange pasty guy motif where he's walking around. I think his girlfriend was a dominatrix that he brought to set, and he's on set and he's got all the lights turned down because he says like the light that hurts me, and he's very much leaning into this I'm a creepy vampire kind of dude who's also the creative mind behind this horrifying thing. And he was just he understood what he was selling and he sold it very well.
Yeah. I've only seen like one little interview with him, and it was kind of like, I don't remember the contents of it, but I remember him being just like, he's French, right? Or is he Belgian?
I was going to say Swedish, but we're probably offending many Eastern European or many European nations by guessing at where he's from. But he's definitely from somewhere in like Middle to Eastern Europe, and yeah, I think he's Swedish.
Hold on, I think I have
This
it.
feels like a solvable problem.
I have it right here. Swiss.
Hey,
Sweden.
not quite.
Switzerland.
Yeah, I was like not quite Swedish, but close enough.
I feel like Sweden and Switzerland, it's like Sweden is as close to Switzerland as you can get. Not in terms of geography, but in terms of
Word play.
yeah, like syllabic sibilance.
Yeah, I think we're just leaning into the deeply offending multiple people in Eastern Europe, but or in Europe. But in any case, yeah, he
You know
I
what?
watched.
They don't listen to the podcast, so
I don't know. I was listening. I was checking out your feed earlier. You had in the hundreds. So I mean, who knows? People can listening from all over.
no, I know exactly who listens to it because I get.
Oh, that's fair.
I get
Okay.
the data. I'm looking at you, Honduras. Who are you? No, I'm just kidding. There's no one from Honduras listening to this podcast. There's nobody listening to the podcast. This is all just for show. It's all just so I can hang out with my friend Max.
Love it.
The tagline for the film, famously, you said it earlier, in space, no one can hear you scream because they're isolated, haunted, and there's nowhere to run. I mean, it's interesting to think like how Aliens kind of deviates from this, but like space makes things inherently scarier because there's nowhere for you to run. To Dennis Heaton's point in the thing, like if you have a means of escape, then you have there's this chance as soon as you remove that, as soon as you isolate somebody or you remove that means of escape, then you amp up the tension by like tenfold.
Mm-hmm. And I think that plays into the brilliance of the stakes of the movie. I mean, even when they do when one of them ultimately escapes at the end, spoilers, it's not as though it's a sure thing. Like they are very explicit for like basically the back half of the movie where there's dwindling numbers of survivors and they're gathering what they need to get onto this lifeboat because they know it's basically a Hail Mary. Let's throw ourselves into space because we might die in cryosleep, but it's better than dying by having this horrifying thing eat us on our own ship. And so, I love the idea that there are these incredible stakes. The movie sort of opens with them waking up and thinking we must be home, and then no, they're in the middle of nowhere in deep space with nowhere near home unexpectedly. It's immediately sort of putting them completely at risk in this unfamiliar landscape, and then the way they show LV-426 when they land on the planet is brilliant because you can't see anything. All it looks like is this incredibly hostile space, and then they get to the derelict, which we haven't even talked about. But one of the best things about this movie, I would say, we can talk about this more later when we get into the sequels. But one of the best things about this movie, I would say, is the fact that it's not about just one alien. It's about two different alien species at least. And it doesn't even really touch on the first one, it's
Space jockey.
I was gonna say let's call him the space jockey because I'd prefer to ignore the whole Prometheus side of things, but we'll get into all that. But they get to the derelict and there's this crashed spaceship with this dead thing on it. Who knows?
Yeah.
We don't know what the story behind that is.
It really is like
for
the
many years we didn't.
implication of stuff that I think is always better than. I always think like the first Star Wars movie, Darth Vader is just a guy. He's a henchman, you know what I mean? But when you make a guy as cool and scary as Darth Vader is just like a henchman, it implies a world, a universe, a galaxy where all is populated by equally interesting people. It implies it's the implication. So sunny. Because of the implication of coolness.
Should I be worried that we're like recording this on a boat or something? Like, what's happening here?
We're not on a boat. You're not on a boat, are you?
Yeah, not as far as I know. But no, I completely agree. I mean, what's that horrible J.J. Abrams concept, the mystery box, or is that what's his name from Lost? But anyways, it's one of them.
Well, J.J. Abrams is from Lost. You're thinking of David.
I was thinking of Lindelof, but yes,
Lindelof.
Either way, it's that mystery box concept, and I think that while we can have a different podcast to get into our complicated feelings about J.J. Abrams and David Lindelof, I think that the concept is sort of really elegantly on display in Alien, in that you have the actual alien that is the driving force of the horror and the tension of the movie, and in the background you have this other alien that you know nothing about, but you know just enough about for it to be the springboard to start the tension and start the narrative arc, and then it actually serves a much better purpose of remaining in the background of this mystery. I don't even know if I would say it's terrifying, besides to say it triggers your imagination. It makes you think, what else could be out there? What don't we know? We know just enough to know that if we scratch it, it's Eldritch. It's getting into Lovecraftian stuff.
It's the implication.
All right,
implication
Dennis.
of coolness, the IOC factor. Wayland Yutani doesn't care about its crew. They don't
Does
give a
not.
fuck.
No.
Just the xenomorph as a potential weapon. Who is Wayland Yutani today? Is it what's his name?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk?
We getting political on this podcast, Hayden?
We can get political. It's one thing he's an idiot.
But I mean, I think that one of the things that all of the Alien movies sort of so elegantly demonstrate is the relentless pursuit of this horrifying weapon is itself idiotic and at the expense of all these human lives. I mean, you could make an argument that it's the ultimate anti-capitalist movie, especially the first one being about basically the working force being dealt this terrible hand, having to try and to capture this asset for the company that is itself a bioweapon that's horrifying. And I would say the movie gets more and more correct in terms of what it's saying about the politics of the working class versus upper management hierarchies every single year that goes by, especially in 2025, especially as we start to see the U.S. government apparatus systematically dismantled by the tech bros. But that's a different podcast. Let's talk about movies.
Yeah, we don't talk about politics in this podcast.
We don't talk about politics. We're just talking about Alien and gender politics. Come on.
So Ripley must be as ruthless as a xenomorph to survive in the first film.
Oh yeah.
Kind of. Not.
I was gonna say, I was like, is that something you're reading, something you've written? Because I don't know that I agree with that statement.
Okay, well, let's dissect it.
Okay. I mean, to me, tell me if you disagree, but I would say, like, to me, ruthlessness implies sort of a, survival first, sorry, hold on a second.
Preservation?
Self-preservation focused. Hey, Rosie. Okay. Self-preservation focused mentality that is really, putting, self-survival over all other considerations. And I just don't think that is at all what Ripley does in the first movie. I mean, she goes back for Jonesy. Even that act alone, she's going back and putting her life at risk for the cat. And she isn't just doing that for the cat. She's also doing it for Parker and for Lambert. She tries at the beginning of the movie, the sort of like key instigating moment when Kane has the face hugger and they want to bring him back on the ship. And she says, she's not releasing them. That's in violation of quarantine and she says specifically in the movie, you could put all of us at risk. She cares about every single member of her crew because she takes her job seriously, but also because I think she's someone who cares about other people and other living things, like with the Jonesy example. So all that is to say that I don't think you can make the argument that she is ruthless or sets aside her most basic principles or sense of what she holds dear in the world to survive. I think that overall she is surviving, but not at any cost.
Yeah, it's a convincing argument. The only thing I disagree with is that she kind of does that, but she also the Jonesy thing is big. She does go back for the cat. But I think she does, over the course of the film, change. Like, it's her character arc to become more survival focused than, you know what I mean? She realizes she's not going to get out on her own without changing. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, I don't know that I think that is her changing. I think that is her stepping up to fill the vacuum of people above her. I mean, when Kane and Dallas are both gone, she steps up to take on the leadership role. But it's not as though she's not raising her opinion or asserting her authority before that. I mean, again, I go back to the sequence where she doesn't want to let Dallas and Lambert and Kane back on because Kane has facehugger on him, and it's, as far as they know, an unknown parasite. And she is in charge. She says as much. She's like, I am in charge when Dallas is off the ship, and the quarantine protocols are you can't come back on. It's going to put us all at risk. Right. To me, I look at this and say, she is someone who from the start of the movie is a person who takes her responsibilities seriously, and she takes the survival and well-being of her colleagues seriously. And she's no nonsense from the get-go. The difference is that as the movie goes on, A, things get more desperate, and B, she's more and more in charge because everyone above her keeps dying. So I guess I'm just sort of saying, like, you know, I'm not going to say there's not a narrative arc or character arc. I think there is one a little bit, to your point. I just think that it's not necessarily that she's changing. I think that she's just becoming more herself and more her leaning into her roles and responsibilities as those change in real time.
Right. Okay. I buy it. Is demystification the enemy of horror? Because this podcast kind of like redundant.
I mean, like, I don't think. First of all, I think there's a difference between demystification and criticism, and I'll do us the great solid and call this criticism as opposed to demystification. But I also think that, you know, you could make the argument that demystification is antithetical to horror and say that the fact that there's been so many Alien movies and they're not particularly scary anymore is the proof in the pudding behind that. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, there are counter arguments to that, but ultimately I do think that there's not a single other movie in the Alien franchise that has come anywhere near as close to being scary the way Alien is. But I also think that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't still remain interesting. Like, we can move into the second movie, and I actually think that there's more to talk about in terms of Ripley and character arcs and all that in the second movie. And we can also talk about the ways the second movie sort of builds on top of the first one and makes the concept of the aliens not necessarily scarier, but certainly demystified, but maybe more interesting. And so I don't know. I don't necessarily disagree with the statement, but I do think that there's room to have a more interesting discussion, even though it may be less unfamiliar or less alien.
Yeah, because I just feel like films like Prometheus and Alien Covenant aim to explain and explore things that I just don't think are worth exploring. Like, the interesting things in those films usually have little to do with the parts that they're illuminating in the lore. Because I think like the more you can preserve the horror, I feel like, what's his name? James Cameron said that AVP, Alien vs. Predator, killed the validity of the franchise. Do you think that's true?
I don't know that I think that's true. I think that, you know, talking about Alien vs. Predator demands a conversation about the Alien franchise, the whole Fox cinematic universe, such as it was, and the Predator franchise. I guess I would just say, you know, the only thing I disagree with, I somewhat disagree with that, but I understand where he's coming from. But I disagree with the earlier thing you said, which is that the suggestion that there's anything interesting about Prometheus and Alien Covenant. But that's a whole other conversation we can get into as we go through the sequels.
You don't like the scene where he's playing the flute?
I think it's actually multiple sequences where Michael Fassbender as David plays the flute, especially in Alien Covenant.
And no, I did not. He plays the flute with himself.
He does play the flute with himself. And is that before or after he kills himself? I think it's before he kills himself.
It would have to be.
Theoretically. As you know, I was going to say Life Finds a Way, and that's from that movie. I'm thinking of the wrong franchise, but there's, you know,
Jurassic Park.
I know, but there's silly little statements like that. You know, small things have, or big things have small beginnings, or whatever David's silly phrase is. And, you know, as you alluded to, the fact that they put lore reasons behind the space jockey and renamed them the engineers, which I don't know. The sequels don't do it for me, but or those sequels anyways. But in terms of, you know, talking about Alien versus Predator, which I think, you know, makes sense for us to talk about, because you and I actually saw. Did we see both Alien versus Predators? I know we saw the first one at least in theaters.
Oh, we definitely saw both of them.
Okay.
Have you seen the second one?
Requiem? Oh yeah, I've definitely seen Requiem.
Well, then you saw it with me. There's no way we didn't see it together.
No, there's definitely no way. And I remember seeing the first one with you and another buddy of ours in theaters, and I thought you were actually going to say, like, I don't know if it was James Cameron. Someone said that basically that movie was like watching action figures just be smashed against each other by a kid, and I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. I do. I still to
It's
this
not even that
day.
fun though.
No, it isn't. But I still to this day think that, it's just for the concept of pitting aliens and predators, two of these, larger than life alien franchises from the 90s against each other, finally in a movie in the early 2000s. The fact that they had to come up with some convoluted plot about a pyramid under Antarctica, I mean, it still mystifies me. Like, why was that the way we had to do this?
So complicated.
It's so complicated, adds so much lore that's so unnecessary, and none of it's additive. I mean, like, that's, again, like the contrast with the space jockey and Alien. Space jockey is great. It this interesting little springboard to launch this franchise and this movie and this story, and then they just leave it alone. It doesn't matter. It's mystery for the sake of getting into the horror versus this mystery that I can't recall exactly, but I believe they go to great lengths to explain it without really giving you much of a compelling reason for any of it. And then they have like a mining town in Antarctica above a hole drilled miles into the ground to where they found like an Aztec temple, pyramid, whatever, buried under the ice. The whole thing is just so convoluted and doesn't do anything to make anything interesting, and creates this whole idea that the aliens have been on Earth for centuries. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems silly.
And like hunting, and like to me, what is most insulting is they ascribe the fall of the Aztecs to the predators being overwhelmed by aliens and blowing everybody up, and not the massacre of their people by colonial imperialists.
I agree. I mean, like, it's deeply offensive. But again, as people who offended both the Swedish and the Swiss, like not 10 minutes ago, I think it's a little bit.
I feel like we
throwing
only
down.
offended one of them. And it was
Which
probably the
one?
Swedes.
Okay.
Because the Swiss are neutral.
Which of the
Swiss
two?
are neutral. The Swiss are neutral.
Okay. Yeah.
They don't get offended.
Well, I think that if we didn't offend them the first time, we've done a pretty good job at covering our bases now. But yeah, no, I do think, the sort of sweeping all that colonial's legacy under the rug for the sake of some convoluted nothing sci-fi story. It's just, there's no good reason to do it other than, I guess, maybe some convenience and efficiency of narrative, arguably. But again, I think that's all giving the Alien versus Predator movie, the first two, a lot more credit than they're necessarily due. I just don't understand why those movies exist in the way that they do.
Money.
Well, I understand why they exist. I mean, again,
okay.
I think the first hint was when they showed the alien skull at the end of Predator 2, and in the ship.
That's where they all went wrong. They're like, wouldn't this be wild? I'm like, not the way.
What, the end of Predator 2 or the entirety of Predator 2?
Well, it's not. We're not mitigating. We're not remitigating Predator 2. We've already talked.
Yeah,
about
I was like,
podcast.
I watched at least part of your episode on that one, and you guys got into it. Like Predator 2, it's just a train wreck from the first sequence. But in any case, adding the alien at the end didn't help things. But it did create this possibility space. And I do think that, like, again, I told you, like, I got into this movie when these movies when I was 9 years old. I was a kid of comic books and sci-fi movies, so I definitely read Alien vs. Predator comics and played Alien vs. Predator games when I was growing up. And I do think that there was some good stuff that was made with that concept as a springboard. I just don't think we've seen it on screen, personally.
The game was awesome.
There was a couple of really good ones. I mean, the first one was fun, and the second one is really awesome. I still remember, like, playing through the second one where you start and you're playing as the face hugger, and you get to go in and track someone down and do that whole process. It's incredible. There's nothing else quite like it. And now I'm talking to myself.
Did you drink my last beer?
I don't.
You drink my still?
I did drink your steak. Anyways, I guess I'm sort of lost on, like, why we talk about the first movie. The first movie is so interesting. We talked about Alien versus Predator, and that's not as interesting. We talked a little bit about Alien Covenant and Prometheus, which are the least interesting. I don't know. Why don't we get into some of the good sequels? Let's talk about Aliens. Let's talk about the weirdness that is Alien 3. Let's talk about the even just as weirdness that is Alien Resurrection. And we can even talk a little bit about the most recent one, Alien Romulus, that seems to have like brought the franchise back to at least some sort of good standing.
I don't like Alien Romulus.
You don't? You seem to like it when we saw it in theaters.
No, I told you I didn't like it.
Oh.
I said you're misremembering things. I
Yeah,
didn't like that movie.
That is entirely possible. I did think it was a little bit cheesy. I thought it had some good ideas, but not enough to sort of justify a full new entry in the franchise. I definitely think it was the most derivative of the Alien movies, which is saying a lot. But
You know what it felt like? It
What's
felt
that?
like Disney making like
A
Disney
horror movie?
bought it and they're making this is the Disney version of Alien.
Well, again, I know we're not doing your Predator episode, but I think that the ultimate test for that will be whatever happens after Prey, because I agree with you and your guest host on that episode that Prey is, if not the best, the second best of the Predator franchise. I'll be very curious to see what they do, because as I understand it, they basically bought that movie as a finished product, and so now they're actually making one. So we will see. I do think that Alien Romulus is a little bit better than that. Like, that is a movie that shows a ton of love for the franchise, a ton of craft, but I don't think it's a particularly great movie. And I think it's a movie that is maybe some of the best things about it are also some of the worst things about it. The fact that it's made by fans. Like, it's a movie that is clearly made by someone who grew up with the franchise the way you and I did, but maybe didn't get away from that to come up with something new and compelling to make it worthwhile again.
It was the same. It was like J.J. Abrams directing Star Wars. You know, like it's just like it has the same kind of vibe to me. It's just like, oh, wouldn't this be cool? Speaking of like like kids playing with action figures, like there's something that's not like there's nothing wrong with that vibe. Like I kind of like that's like what Fast and the Furious is like basically is like with playing with Hot Wheels on steroids.
It is. And, you also got like Vin Diesel like talking with a ham sandwich all in his mouth about family and stuff. It's great. Like I enjoy a lot of the Fast and Furious movies. I wouldn't be as disrespectful to Alien Romulus as comparing it to the J.J. Abrams Star Wars movies, but I get the comparison. Like, it's someone playing with something for the aesthetic as opposed to the actual core meaning of it underneath it.
Mhm.
And I do think that's probably true of Alien Romulus, frankly. Like, it is a movie that I think understands a lot of elements about what makes the Alien franchise successful, but doesn't fully get what made it iconic and classic. I guess I would just say that the difference to me is that J.J. Abrams with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, or at least the first and the third, had positively nothing to say. I think that Fede Alvarez, is that his name?
Fede
The director?
Alvarez, yeah.
Yeah. Fede Alvarez, it's not that he had nothing to say, it's that he had nothing new to say, but I think he had a lot to say about how much he appreciated what had been said before. And I think that J.J. Abrams appreciates the look personally, but like nothing about it nothing about the sequel trilogy spoke to the love of the underlying material to me, the way that Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus did.
It's interesting because I think they're both like cheap, slutty knockoffs.
Again, I don't fully disagree with that statement. I just think that it's like maybe casting too wide a brush on Alien Romulus personally. But let's
You
talk
like
about
the
Aliens.
movie? It's fine. You don't have to take it personally. You didn't make it.
No, I mean, like, I think like I told you at the time, like I gave it a solid like 7 out of 10. It's fine. But let's talk about Aliens. Let's talk about the number 2. Because I think like that's the real interesting debate. I mean, we talk about in whenever we talk about movies and franchises, talk about what is the example of the sequel that exceeds the original, and one of the number one examples that people give is Aliens over Alien. I don't agree personally. I prefer Alien to Aliens, but I understand why, because Aliens is so close in terms of quality to the original. It's such an effective sequel in the ways that it builds on and changes the underlying formula. Like,
Mhm.
Aliens is such a great sequel, What do you think about it?
It's okay. I don't like it as much as Alien. I think the genre switch makes it like new and interesting, like from horror to action. But I think it robs it some of the intimacy of the first film. The characters are a little schlockier. They're a little more macho bullshit that I don't really like all the marine stuff. That I'm like, they don't crack a marine open in a way that I think is interesting or anything. Like they're all just kind of stock action characters, which is fine. That's their purpose. But it would have been nice to sort of, get in there a little bit and shake up the psychology a little bit in a way that they had the potential to when you put people in such extreme situations. I like the dynamic between what's her name? Ripley and Newt. I think that's very cute. And I like Bishop as a character. There's a lot that I like, but I don't think like it doesn't feel as I don't know. That's the wrong word I'm looking at.
I actually think it's a good word
It
for it.
feels less of a singular vision than Alien does. It just feels more like it's a sequel, and like that's the ultimate thing against it is like it's Alien is such an evocative film, and so much of it has to do with I think Giger's production design, who wasn't involved in Aliens.
No,
They didn't bring him back.
he wasn't, and it's interesting because like I remember as a kid always sort of wondering, why does the alien in the first one has the smooth head, and the alien in the number two they have like the sort of indented head
Yeah.
with all the texture. I actually think they're both very effective in certain ways, and I actually think it's really interesting the ways that they, you talked about the alien life cycle and the reproductive cycle about the first one, and I think it's actually really interesting the way that the alien sort of adds on to that and creating this whole sort of like insect caste system where the queen and then the drones and all of that. I think that's very interesting. And the hive, like all of that is unique to aliens. And I think it's really interesting in the way it expands the franchise. I also think that Aliens is an interesting movie because, you're sort of getting back to what you said before. Aliens is a movie where, to me, Alien is about Ripley coming into her responsibilities, coming into her own, but ultimately remaining relatively the same person, just under more extreme circumstances and more heightened responsibilities. To me, Aliens is much more a movie about a character arc because it's a movie about her and her identity when her identity is lost, when she's lost her job, she's lost her license, she's lost
Her
her
daughter.
family and her daughter. And then the movie is about her finding who she is, finding her survival skills, finding her sense of self and identity all over again. But also a big part of that playing into that is her motherhood and sort of finding the surrogate daughter and putting everything on the line for it and finding that sense of sense of identity again. And I don't want to, reduce Ripley to a mother because I think that'd be so disrespectful to the franchise and the character. But I do think that that is critical to the movie Aliens. Like, I really like Aliens. I really like James Cameron in his own way, but I think that James Cameron is one of these hugely successful directors that I think could be much better with a better editor. And Aliens is sort of the movie I can point to the most clearly because they have the extended director's cut or whatever that's come out on all the DVD and Blu-ray releases of that movie, and they have all these additional sequences with like gun turrets and all that. And I don't think any of it helps the movie at all. But there's one critical sequence at the beginning of the movie where they show Ripley learning that her daughter died before she came back out of cryosleep in between the first two movies.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking, and it also, to me, sets up the narrative arc of the entire movie that is otherwise still there in the finished product, and I don't understand for the life of me why they cut that scene of all scenes. Like, the movie, to me, is incomplete without that sequence about her daughter, because it sets up Ripley's entire arc, that she's completely lost and alone in the universe that she's woken up into after drifting through space for 57 years, and then over the course of the movie, she finds herself and grounds herself by going back, taking charge, taking revenge, and coming out on her own terms with Newt as this new sort of surrogate daughter and Hicks and Bishop as her surrogate family that she's found around her. Like, to me, that whole movie is about Ripley having that character arc of finding out who she is again after she loses everything in the first movie and the aftermath.
True. They kind of like. Well, no, who's Mother? That's in the first film, right? They called the
Mother, Mother is definitely the AI driving the ship in the first movie. And then they have Father in Alien Resurrection. I'm trying to remember if there's any AI in Aliens. I don't remember
Bishop.
one. I mean, there's Bishop, yes, but I don't remember like a computer.
Right. Weird. Like, how do those AIs different from each other? Like Bishop and Mother, or what's his name? What's the guy? What's Ian Holmes' character's name?
Ash.
Ash, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between Ash and Mother?
They don't really get into it all that much because I don't think those movies are as interested in the sense of what is humanity. They're much more interested in the body horror. They're interested in sort of
But
the gender politics.
They're interested in what is alien, and that is inextricably linked to what is human.
That's a fair point. I guess I guess what I mean is that like they're not looking at artificial humans as a
Right.
focal point the
Right.
way that, for example, arguably Prometheus and Alien Covenant start to, because those movies are really much more Blade Runner movies than they are Alien movies. But
Yeah.
like the first couple of Alien movies are really not that invested in that concept, and so I couldn't tell you what the difference is between Mother and Ash or Bishop and anything like they're interested in those people in terms of their roles as tools of Weyland-Yutani, the same way that Ripley and her crew in the first movie and Ripley and the Marines are likewise tools of the corporate overlords. And I think that Ash and Bishop are interesting contrasts because of the ways that they sort of build morality into the machine in between the two sequels, or in between the first two movies.
Yeah, Bishop is a very different beast than Ash. I think, which is weird because Lance Henriksen is like such a worse actor than Ian Holm. Listen, I like Lance Henriksen, but he doesn't have the best range. Ian Holm is a fantastic actor. And there's something very chilling in his performance in that first film. And I guess they recreated it with AI and Alien Romulus.
I mean, I don't have the same level of issues with the Ian Holmes recreation in Alien Romulus that a lot of people do, especially given that his estate and his wife or his widow are on board and compensated, frankly. But all that is to say, I think it was an interesting way to bring back both the character and also the physical presence of the company. And to your point about Ian Holmes versus Lance Henriksen, I don't disagree. I think you're exactly right on the money. I also think that, Lance Henriksen was very well suited to playing a artificial person. And it was a role that really spoke to his strengths. And I think that he did a hell of a job in an iconic role that was exactly to his aptitude. I mean, the comparison I'd make is the guy who played Hilo on Battlestar Galactica. He played the hell out of that role in that show. And the moment I saw him in anything else, I did not like him as much anymore because he was still only limited to that exact same specific range.
Yeah.
And yeah, Lance Henriksen was exactly the same with Bishop.
He's terrible, that actor. What's his name? Tamura? Or what's his name?
I don't even remember, but I'm like, I didn't come on this to like start down like a bad mouth.
Let's bash him. Bash him. Back him away. What's his name?
God, I don't know. He was on Battlestar, and then he was on Dollhouse, and I just remember being stoked because
Tamo Panikin.
Okay. But I remember watching him on Dollhouse and being stoked because I was like, he was so good in Battlestar, and then like the first scene he's in on Dollhouse, not a great show, but a show with ideas at least. You sort of watching, you're like, oh no. Oh no, this is terrible.
Yeah. Who was like that for me was I can't remember his name, but he was in the American Pie movies, and then he played a character in Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li.
You watch Street Fighter: The Legend of Chun-Li is my first question.
Listen, I don't have any excuses. I literally I saw it and I watched the movie, and it was not good. It was not a good movie, but it wasn't a terrible movie. I'd watch it again. What's her name's good in it? Kristen.
I was like, if I'm gonna watch any Street Fighter movie, it's gonna be the one with Raul Julia,
Of
and it's
course,
gonna be
yeah.
the one where Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue are like the two titular starring roles, and they're in the movie for like what 20 minutes because there was that great article from like 10 years ago that did like the expose on how that whole production went down, and it's like basically Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue just spent the entire production doing cocaine and having sex in their trailer because they were having like this like incredibly open affair on the set of that movie. And so like they couldn't get him out of the trailer because they would either be sleeping or f***ing. And so I'm assuming I'm allowed to swear on this, but so instead they'd have to write sequences like, oh yeah, they have to fight the janitor who's also a ninja or something. Like that movie is just the most hilarious train wreck of all time as far as I'm concerned.
Pretty funny. What's her name's in it too? The girl from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Don't know. I don't think I ever watched any episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if I'm being honest.
What's her name? Ming something?
She's in The Legend of Chun-Li or the original Street Fighter movie with Raul Julia?
Ming Na Wen. Street Fighter. He played what's her name?
Chun-Li?
Chun-Li, yeah.
Okay. Man, I can tell you, I didn't expect to be talking about Street Fighter when I came on a podcast about Alien.
Yes. Well, that's the beauty of this podcast. It goes everywhere.
Free form.
Yeah. Well, we threw the structure out when I stopped asking the relevant questions that I had.
Well, you got any other questions? Anything else you want to
No, let's talk
cover?
about Alien 3. Let's get into it. Yeah, Alien 3 is probably the most... I don't know. It's between Alien 3 and Alien 4. They're like I'm trying to think which is like the most beguiled in terms of development. Like at one point, Alien 3 was going to be about monks on a planet made entirely out of wood.
I actually think would have been very interesting because, like, what the hell else could that have been compared to? Like, that's such a weird alien concept.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that would have feeded into like the theme of the story. But I think the problem with it is what happens when you introduce a face hugger into it, and they can't really attack it with flame, as if everything is made out of wood, and they can't really. The acid would burn through the wood really quickly. I just think it's a terrible idea, like in terms of practical.
Planet of wood in space is a terrible idea. I don't know. I don't know where you're coming from, Hayden. It just pops. I just want to see it. No, I agree with you. I mean, like I have always wanted to read that script or see that movie for no other reason than a morbid curiosity because it just sounds like such a bad idea on its face.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you know, the history of that movie, the development of that movie just sounds like sort of one of the case studies of what not to do. Like they're like, we're going to make a sequel. We're going to throw a date on it. And then we're going full steam ahead for that date come hell or high water because we put advertising dollars behind it. And so, you know, now they've got like, I think William Gibson wrote a treatment for that. There was a script for it. Like that, they put a ton of money and talent behind that movie. And it's David Fincher's like feature length debut. There's so many reasons that movie could have and should have succeeded, and yet it fails on just about every level. And I still don't think it's a terrible movie. Like
It's not.
the theatrical cut, even, you know, I know there's the assembly cut or whatever that is not a director's cut because David Fincher won't talk to the studio anymore. No one would touch that movie with a 10-foot pole. But they do have, you know, the alternate cuts of that movie, and I think they're interesting. So you know, again, going back to my nerdiness of all of this, when I was a kid, I did have the comic book adaptation of Alien 3, and I remember being so confused because the comic book version is so different from the movie. And as I found out when I got older, it's because the comic was based on the shooting script, which is
Right.
what is more like the assembly cut. But the movie was so drastically changed because they changed it on set because they were like, this is not working. We hate this. And so The comic is a little more, I would say, cohesive, but it's still not good because nothing about that production was good. It was sort of a train wreck from day one. But it's interesting to think that they had David Fincher, of all people, at that point in his career,
Yeah.
just a few years before he would go on to do Seven and Fight Club and all these iconic movies. He should have been exactly the right person to do Alien 3, and yet he was stymied at every opportunity. He's coming out of cast. He's got Sigourney Weaver coming back for her iconic role as Ripley again for the last time, quote unquote. And they've got is it Peter Dance,
Charles Dance.
Charles Dance, sorry, Tywin Lannister himself. I know. I was like, I couldn't get past Tywin Lannister, but they got him in in Sigourney Weaver's romantic interest role. They've got Charles Dutton as sort of the good guy character, and they've got overall the entire cast of The Prisoners is all really well acted, really well performed. They've just given nothing to work with, and so I don't know. I just find that movie, it's a fascinating failure because it's got so much talent on screen and behind the camera, and yet it's so barely watchable. But it still has interesting ideas. Again, like the camera shots of the aliens POV towards the end are cheesy and incredibly 90s, but they're still effective. The special effects are bad, and yet they still have, they don't look bad in the way that, for example, Escape from Los Angeles looks. They have what else is good in that is interesting in that movie. The movie is interesting in the ways that it still is able to build on and say new things about the whole alien species. This idea that in the theatrical cut, it's the facehugger getting onto a dog. In the assembly cut, it's on a cow. And either way, it creates this creature that is not human in the ways, quote unquote, human, in the ways that the alien in Alien and Aliens was. And so I don't know. I just think it's a movie that is still interesting despite being such a colossal train wreck.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, thinking the xenomorph is like what's so interesting is how adaptable it is. Like it manifests the traits of its host, right?
Exactly. And
I think that makes it like a compelling killer. But I think it's a corruption, right? Like it's not a normal. It like corrupts who you are, and I don't know.
Well, and I think that that's an interesting way of looking at it that I don't think has really been explored because they haven't really looked at besides the first two Alien movies or the first three Alien movies, like where they have it in the initial movie where it's really
He's
just
showing you her toys.
I can tell. This was Kong the Duck, but the first like two movies are sort of about like it taking over this one person and the one space trucker and the colony, and then the third movie taking over the prison planet when it's the dog or the bull. It's interesting in the ways that it sort of fleshes out this threat, but then
do you want to talk about Alien Resurrection or?
we can talk about it a little bit. That was the only one of the original four that I was old enough to see in theaters, and I have sort of mixed feelings about it because I think like it's a movie that, again, like Alien 3, has a lot of talent behind it, just not a lot of successful execution on screen. I guess like the difference is the third one's unsuccessful for studio meddling reasons and like just a terrible development cycle, versus the fourth one, at least as far as I'm aware, is mostly just because it was directed in ways that I don't think were very successful for the franchise. But yeah, like I don't hate the fourth movie. I just think it's not interesting in the ways it's additive to the franchise, and I don't know. I don't think the fourth one brings anything new to the table that's very interesting, but I do think there's still, again, a lot of talent. Like I think that Winona Ryder's great in that movie. Sigourney Weaver is.
Ron Perlman has my favorite line of dialogue in the movie. You will find out I'm not someone with whom to.
I mean, I'm trying to think of a movie that includes Ron Perlman where he doesn't have my favorite line in the movie. Like Ron Perlman is just a gem, and
He really is.
And so yeah, I mean, like any movie that's gonna have Ron Perlman is gonna get at least a watch. So Yeah, I think Alien Resurrection is not a good movie, but it's certainly not a terrible movie. It's just it's bad for reasons that are so fundamentally different from why Alien 3 is bad and why everything that came after it is bad. So, I don't know, I think Alien Resurrection is just a weirdly misguided movie that, again, maybe the first in the franchise that comes to sort of the same problem that we see with Alien Romulus, which is, like, they clearly have a love for the source material, but they don't have anything really interesting or new to say.
All right, it's time for fan theories. So we don't have a lot of fan theories. This one comes from Dr. Tanbaz. They have a theory about the origins of the offspring alien seen in Alien Romulus. It proposes that the creature's striking resemblance to engineers from Prometheus is due to an atavistic reversion, the phenomena where ancestral traits reappear. According to the theory, Kay Harrison, who while pregnant is injected with a sample of the pathogen Z01, which acts as on her developing fetus. This results in the offspring retaining primitive engineer features such as pale, almost translucent skin, lack of body hair, and distinct eye color, while also incorporating human and xenomorphic characteristics. What do you think? Atavistic reversion.
Yeah, I mean, like, atavism is a concept that comes up in a lot of literature. I think it's a pretty fundamentally a racist philosophy based from colonial era.
Is it really?
Yeah, like I'm pretty sure atavism comes up in like the original like Heart of Darkness novel. I could be misremembering that, but I think I'm right. And it's basically this whole idea of like it's sort of it's basically this idea that good British folk can atavistically revert to their savage underlying origins of the species kind of thing when exposed to these like sort of savage uh environments like I'm trying to remember where the original Heart of Darkness cave took place. I think it's somewhere in Africa. And so like all that is to say, like, I'm pretty sure that that's sort of a fundamentally uh racist colonial era doctrine. And so I am sort of like, yeah, take it or leave it on that basis in terms of looking into it too closely with respect to Alien Romulus. I have heard that whole theory that the offspring or newborn or sorry, the offspring, this newborn is the one in Resurrection. The offspring is a callback to the engineers, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that Alien Romulus really bends over backwards to try to make the lore of Alien Covenant and Prometheus line up with the existing lore of the Alien franchise and bring things back to sort of the neutral baseline of the Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection of it all. I still fundamentally don't care or don't like anything that Alien Covenant and Prometheus added to the franchise. So I don't know that it does a ton for me, but yeah.
I also read somewhere that Blade Runner and Alien are in the same universe, and I really hate it.
Yeah, I don't love that. Yeah, I don't love that. I think that that's a way of trying to make David Michael Fassbender's character in Prometheus more interesting than he is.
Wait, what do you mean by that?
I think that the like Blade Runner is fundamentally a series about what does it mean if we create artificial people? What does that mean what does that say about humanity? What does that say about people? What does that say about us all? And I think that's a fascinating series of philosophical questions that Blade Runner does, and its sequel do successful and unsuccessful jobs of unpacking, answering, and exploring. And I think that I really appreciate those movies for what they are, for the fact that they're really engaged with those questions. I don't think that the Alien franchise, to our earlier discussion about what's the difference between Ash and Bishop versus Mother and Father in terms of the AIs of it all. I don't think the Alien franchise is particularly interested in those questions until you get to Prometheus and Alien Covenant, when basically Ridley Scott comes back and he wants to explore some of those same kinds of questions that he explored with Blade Runner, but in the Alien franchise. And so I think that trying to say that they're in the same universe is really just a way of trying to say that Ridley Scott was more interested in making movies about what does it mean to be human and what does it mean to create artificial people than he was about making more movies in the Alien universe. And that's ultimately what we got, and why Prometheus and Alien Covenant are so messy and unsuccessful. What do you think? I mean, like, what do you think of Alien Covenant and Prometheus, and what do you think of this idea that they're in the same universe?
I hate that they'd be connected. I don't like it when things connect in cutesy ways or whatever. If things kind of line up and that's your head canon, like that's fine. Like leave it on Reddit, but like leave it on Reddit. You know, like I don't need it infecting my. Like I think like thematically, I don't think the two franchises have enough in common. I think like there's certain similarities in terms of like exploitation of workers. I think, especially in Alien Romulus, where like part of what they're after is like the ability to successfully colonize space through use of the engineer technology or engineering, or not engineering. I'm a little buzz from these beers that I've been drinking.
Well, I think it goes back further than that because I mean, like right from the first movie, it's these space truckers, these working class folk
Yeah,
who are out on these like thankless years, decades long tasks of flying through deep space to like haul shit around for the upper management, and ultimately they're all expendable because the company doesn't care about them. They care about the assets they're towing, but they care a lot more about the assets they might be able to capture while they're out in the wild.
yeah.
And so I see the commonality, but the commonality is basically anti-capitalism. And, fair enough. Like both movies have some of that baked into their lore at the sort of like critical core level. I don't think that that's enough to say that they are in the same universe. Rosie. And I just don't think that we gain anything by saying they're in the same universe. I don't think it adds anything. I think it makes both movies less interesting. And I think that it changes the discussion that both movies are interested in having in ways that are not, they don't open up the conversation. They just sort of make it a little more amorphous and all over the place.
It's weird. But the more you connect things, the smaller things feel. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like when
I
you
would agree.
when you start making these connections and like everyone's related to each other or whatever, or they're set in the same universe, like everything feels, the entire galaxy feels smaller.
So, all right. So let me ask you, what would you say is your favorite movie in the franchise?
Alien,
Yeah.
easily, by a wide margin. I like Aliens, but Aliens, I just I think the first one is such a good movie. And like I think like you kind of know that when you said like those characters are not gendered, but like could have easily been such a schlocky mess, and it's like it's so good, And I think the first pass of the Alien script was really really rough. I think like I don't I who rewrote it?
After Dan O'Bannon and the other guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dan O'Bannon and
Oh,
the
oh,
other
it
guy.
was Walter Hill that I was thinking of that worked on it
Okay.
on the script.
Because like the sort of the core two, O'Bannon and whoever, they're like the sort of
Schuster,
Schuster, thank you. And like they like wrote
or
the
no,
core
no,
thing.
not Schuster. Shusett. Ronald Shusett.
Okay. But like they wrote like the core treatment and premise, but then again,
Yeah.
like to your point, like it went through a lot of rewrites and a lot of different creative minds. And so like to me, like I don't actually think that they have any real involvement in what we ended up seeing on the screen other than sort of breaking the initial concept. And really to me, and I think to your point earlier on, what makes that movie so successful is the incredible production design, the incredible strong and confident direction, and then this incredible creature design from Giger. And so, yeah, and that's like not.
Cast.
Yeah, I was
Has
gonna say
to.
not to discredit the incredible series of performances
Tom
on screen.
Skerritt, Veronica Cartwright, John Hurt, Ian Holm, Yatha Koto. Like that's a big cast.
Yeah. And not to mention Sigourney Weaver. I mean, like again, everyone in that movie is
Harry Dean Stanton.
Harry Dean Stanton. Jesus Christ! And like that close up of him when he is in the industrial room and the alien is about to come down and come after him. Like every single person in that movie is just firing on all cylinders. Like it's just a perfect movie as far as I'm concerned.
What do you guys think about? What do you think about the Alien Earth?
I remain cautiously optimistic, mostly because of what's his
Noah
name? The guy who
Hawley?
did, yeah, thank you, Noah Hawley. I really liked seasons 1 and 2 of Fargo. I enjoyed but fell off it after season 3, and I have tried like multiple times to get through Legion, but I just cannot find a way to make myself interested in watching that show. But I guess like Noah Hawley is someone who has a vision and has interesting ideas, and I love the idea of him trying to do a series in this franchise that has a vision. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt that he does have a vision, so I want to watch it, and I'm hoping it'll be like at the levels of Fargo seasons 1 or 2, and we'll see. Maybe I'll be eating my words in a few months, but I would really like it to be at that level of quality because I think like there's a lot of potential there. Um, I I guess like fundamentally my question is, what is his vision and what does he have to add to the franchise that we haven't seen already?
Yeah, I expect he has something. I wouldn't think he would go into it without having a take. Is whether or not that take is good is TBD. But I'm
Yeah,
excited to see what his spin on it.
yeah,
That's out
I
this year, I think,
agree.
right?
I think it's in May.
May, that's soon. All right,
Yeah.
Mary Probe Kill.
Nearly pro kill. Nearly pro kill.
I mean, Mary Alien, obviously. Has that not both of our answers?
What?
Mary Alien, obviously.
You don't know what I'm talking about. Mary, you don't know what the options are.
All right, you're going to give
The
us the
options
terrible
are
options.
Mary Probe Kill. Ellen Ripley in Alien. Ellen Ripley in Aliens. Charles Dance in Alien 3.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I feel like Ellen Ripley and Alien versus Aliens is kind of the same one. And I don't know that I want to kill any of them. Um, I'm like, Charles Dance is in that prison colony I'm trying to remember what he's in there for, but I believe
Tax
he
evasion. It's kind of a bullshit.
was
He
tax
didn't,
evasion. No, I thought
he
I
didn't
thought
pay
he
his
was
taxes.
I thought he was prescribing things. I thought that was the
No,
whole thing.
he didn't pay his taxes, and they're like, you go to jail now.
That
I don't know.
cannot be it. I was like, no, like they have that whole sequence in the movie, man, where they talk about why he's in jail. I was
don't
like, it is
remember it.
not tax evasion. You're making me question all of my memories. No, no, he has this whole sequence where I think he was over prescribing to his patients, or he was like prescribing things with it, and like he lost his license for that reason or something.
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is I'd probably probe him because it feels like he'd be a good time. And then you're asking me to like marry or kill essentially the same character in different movies. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, it's tough to say. Like, I want to be sort of like gender normative about it. I guess like marry Ellen Ripley in Aliens, but maybe be a little more interesting about it. Marry Ellen Ripley in Alien. Like they're both. It's the same two sides of the same coin. So I don't know that it makes a difference there unless I'm killing Charles Dance.
I kind of originally was gonna say Ellen Ripley in Alien 3, but I kind of pivoted last second to Charles Dance because I thought it was funnier.
Well, why don't we say have this? Marry, probe, kill, the alien from Alien, the dog alien from Alien 3, or the newborn from Alien Resurrection / the offspring, since they're very, very, very similar. And that's your choice. Who you marry, probe, killing?
I'm marrying the alien from Alien. Probably killing the dog. No, you can't kill a dog.
I was like, where's Rosie? Rosie, shut your ears.
And then smashing the offspring. That feels weird.
It's probing the
that's
offspring feel better. I don't know.
Probing. Yeah, that's probably it. All right, let's move on. If you were given the keys to the kingdom, what would you do with an Alien sequel?
Off the cuff, I'm not sure I have like an interesting idea that's additive to the Alien vision, but I guess what I would want to do is something that leans into both the corporate and gender politics of it. And I don't necessarily think that there's an interesting story that I feel I need to tell on Earth, but I definitely feel like there's an interesting story that could be told at the highest level of Weyland-Yutani, like have a Alien sequel that is set on the space station above Earth that is the the Weyland-Yutani headquarters. Have the like head of Weyland-Yutani, the Elon Musk of Weyland-Yutani, have him become impregnated by an alien. May have him choose to do so because he thinks that it's going to be some sort of form of evolution to a higher state or something, some nonsense like that. Like I would want to really go after the Weyland-Yutani of it all, but not
Okay.
in the way that Prometheus and Alien Covenant did in terms of having him be this sort of old sickly folk who's sitting there in secret in cryosleep on the ship because he wants to meet God. I want to have him want to ascend to godhood and play into the whole Alien franchise that way. Like have that be the whole maniacal way from the top down, the madness sort of infects a space station or something.
I would make kind of like. So you've seen Alien, right?
I have indeed
In
seen
my
Alien.
sequel, they go back to the planet, and there's a bunch of people that have been living there, and they lost contact with them, with the same planet, and they sent a bunch of like, I don't know what you call them, but I guess like maybe like colonial marines.
Okay.
They send them in with Ripley, who's been like cryogenically frozen for like 80 years, and her daughter has died.
Okay, so
They
like fast
send-
forward future. No, she's got
Yeah.
no ties.
Got no ties. She's lost everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, all right, I guess I'm going back in. And she falls in love with an alien, and she has sex with it and gets pregnant and raises the baby. She moves to Omaha, Nebraska.
You really had me until Omaha. I mean, like I was gonna say, I was like, write
Omaha.
the word alien on a whiteboard, and then like just write a dollar sign at the end. Sounds great. I love it. I'm sold.
Yeah, it was just the plot to Aliens.
I'm aware.
So Alien versus Predator. We've talked about it a little bit,
Okay.
but if you had to say who would win in a fight, gotta be the alien, right?
I think it's sort of one of those an unstoppable force meets an immovable object kind of questions because
Nia Jax.
pardon me. We're talking Mortal Kombat, Jax.
No, we're talking WWE.
Okay.
Nia Jax. She's on SmackDown, or she's on Raw now. She moved to Raw. It doesn't matter.
I was like, I'm way not too up to date.
You're not
on
going
my
to
wrestling
Elimination Chamber on Saturday?
No, I am not going to Elimination Chamber on
I thought
Saturday.
you love Glow. You always go to all the WWE events.
As I think I've told you, but every 3 to 4 years, I rewatch Glow and I remember how much I love that show, and I get really stoked and excited about wrestling, and I buy a ticket to like a either professional or unprofessional wrestling event, and I go, and about 20 minutes in, I realize I don't like wrestling, and I still don't like wrestling, and then I sort of sit through the rest of it and still don't enjoy it. I like wrestling conceptually, but in practice, not for me.
So good. You're so dead wrong.
I agree with you, man. Like, I wish I could love it more. I want so badly to love it, and every time I go, I'm like, I'm still bored.
All right, let's wrap this up. Sexy Close Encounters. Would you bone an alien?
I think that by definition, I wouldn't have a choice.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, but I mean, like, if they like seduced you, would you be like, yeah, I'm into this?
I mean, presumably, if they seduced me, I'd be into it. Yeah.
Okay. Max likes aliens. Max likes alien dong. Confirmed.
When
Do
we
you
say
believe in
alien
aliens?
dong, do we mean like their tongue? I have no idea what that means.
The penis.
I'm aware, but like they are themselves, like they're okay. Whatever. We don't need to get into the mechanics of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thumbnail for the episode for sure, right?
No, I'm not in the thumbnails.
Should you be though?
I could, but I won't be. I'm not that kind of guy. But that
Okay.
guy, pal.
Okay, so wait. So before we wrap this up, I want to know if you could go back to watch any of the Alien movies in the theater the first time, like opening weekend, with an audience that had never seen that particular Alien movie before. You and I were there for Alien versus Predator. I was there for Alien Resurrection. you and I were both there for Alien Romulus,
Mhm.
and I was there for Prometheus. I don't think I was. I don't think I rushed over Alien Covenant. So really, we've had like kind of a shit end of the stick on this one. But like, if you could go back and watch any of the movies, and I'm expecting it's gonna be a choice between the first two, which of the ones would you like to be there for?
You know what it would be? It'd be Aliens, because Alien is too scary,
Hmm.
and I need to hide under the covers to watch it. So I like watching it at home. But Aliens, I could watch that in theaters. That's an action movie.
I think like I'm torn because like I agree with you. Like Aliens would be more fun to see in the theaters the first time, but I also like no one had seen the chest burster or anything like that. Like the idea of watching that first movie with an audience that is gonna effectively have the same reaction that Lambert does in that movie and just fucking lose it when that sequence happens. I don't know. That sounds so cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of My Favorite Alien. We talked a lot about Max's favorite alien, the Xenomorph. We didn't really cover a lot of like the ins and outs of it, which is fine. We just talked about movies and we had a good time. I think that's what's more important than anything. These days, you can't discredit a good time, you know? You gotta...
We can talk about ins and outs, man.
I don't really want to because I find it kind of boring. Most of the questions I had were kind of like, I don't know. Kind of missed the mark on this one a little bit, but it's fine. It happens.
I'm kind of curious to see the questions only because like
They're not good.
Okay. But it's just like I remember like you told me like you wanted to do your podcast about the alien, like whatever, pick an alien in a movie and like we'll talk about that movie and that alien. And I was like, well, the one I'd want to do was obviously like the Xenomorph from the Alien franchise. And I was like, that's definitely been picked. Like nobody's picked that. I'm glad I picked it. I'm glad we got to talk about it. Like I'm happy to go into more of the ins and outs of it. Certainly more interesting than Independence Day, which I guess was my second choice.
That would have been fun.
Yeah, but I would have had to watch the sequel and like fuck that.
You wouldn't have to watch the sequel. You could just watch the first one. I would have had to watch the sequel.
Yeah, that's fair. I watched the first one. I watched it many times. I saw that was another one I saw in theaters like the summer it came out, 1997. I was there for ID4, man. That movie was great.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Want to talk about ID4 for 5 minutes?
No, we're gonna go. Okay. We gotta wrap it up. I gotta smoke a joint. I will see you guys all later soon, and I hope you guys have a wonderful evening and a wonderful morning or a wonderful afternoon. I don't know what time you're listening to this. I don't know why I'm pretending that I know. I don't know. I don't know when you're gonna listen to it. It could be any time of day. It could be 5 a.m. What do people do at 5 a.m? It's like I can't ascribe a single thing other than like this. I got a diner. You know what I mean? Like that's what you do at 5 a.m. Like nobody's ever like up and I guess there are people that are up and
I was like, this is the most not apparent thing I've ever heard anyone say. I was like, yeah, I'm up at 5 all the time, man.
Yeah, I don't have kids. I'm not an idiot.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that framing.
I like having money and things and time and time to do things. Anyways, let's not get into that conversation.
Well, it seems very appropriate for a movie that's fundamentally about our impregnation.
Sort of, but not really. All right, I will talk to you guys later. Hope you guys have a wonderful day and keep searching, my lovelies.